Welcome back to another English online session. Today, I am going to narrate the summary of the second chapter in Snapshot. The name of the chapter is The Address. This story is about the human predicament that follows the pre-war and post-war period. Mrs. S, who was a Jew, was a rich lady, whereas Mrs. Dorling was a non-Jew. The girl, daughter of Mrs. S, had lost her house and her mother during the war, and now she had decided to come back to take her possessions from Mrs. Dorling. An acquaintance whose address was given by her mother years ago. When she reached the house, the woman treated her with a cold reception and didn't let her into the house. She decided to go back anyway, and then she met her daughter, who let her in and told her to wait inside. When she saw all the possessions in front of her, she couldn't connect with them and decided to leave the house. So, as it is explained in the introduction, this story explains you how this war affect the life of a people, particularly the life of the author. This story was written by Marga Mingo. She ranks among the most important Dutch writers. While she started out writing children's stories, followed by the petty tales about misalliances and misunderstandings, her reputation lies in the novels and short stories dealing with the Holocaust. Indeed, her work has been made required reading for Dutch high school students. The narrator in her work is usually someone who resembles the author. Now, let me narrate the story. The protagonist asked the woman standing at the door if she still knew her. The lady had opened the door a little. The protagonist came closer to the door and stood there. The woman responded negatively, and the protagonist still gave her an introduction. She said she was Mrs. S.'s daughter. The woman held the door tightly as she didn't want her to enter the house. She kept staring at the protagonist, though she couldn't recognize her. The protagonist thought maybe she had come to the wrong house. She had seen the woman only for a short time years ago. The woman who answered the doorstep aside let go of the door. The protagonist recognized her mother's green knitted cardigan. Cardigan is a type of dress, usually made up of wool, and it covers the upper body that the woman was wearing. The wooden buttons had become pale because of the washing. The woman noticed the protagonist looking at the cardigan. She hid behind the door. Now the protagonist knew she had come in the right house. The protagonist asked the woman about her mother. The woman asked her if she had come back. Here she is the author's mother, which means Mrs. S. The author replied that no one else came with her. She is the only person came to visit this house. The woman opened the door, and a passage was behind her. A stale smell occurred all over. The woman told her that she could not do anything for her. The protagonist told her that she had come from far place on the train just to talk to her. The woman told her it is not convenient to talk right now and asked her to come back later. The woman closed the door as she didn't want anyone to get disturbed in the house. She very slowly closed the door, like she is uh, not disturbing anyone inside the house. The protagonist was still standing on the step. She saw a curtain moving on the window bay. Someone was staring at her from inside the house. She thought it was nothing as the woman had told her. The protagonist looked at the number plate again. It said number 46. Dorling was written on the plate on white enamel. This is usual. If you check in the houses, the house number or name board fixed to identify it. The same here, the authors, the protagonist mother gave this number and this name to identify the person, and it is very correct, but still the person in the house, Mrs. Dorling, is refused to accept it. As she was going back to the station, she was thinking about her mother who gave her the address. So now the story is going back, a flashback. Uh, the author or the protagonist and her mother in the wartime, the first half of the war, they just lived here together. Then only they left this place. So she is thinking all those things. It was the first half of the war. She was home for a few days, and suddenly it struck her that the room was different now. So, our author, in the first half of the war, suddenly she is noticing that in her house many things are missing. Various things were missing. She identified that in her house various things were missing. She is trying to find that where it had gone. Her mother was surprised. Her mother here are the authors, the protagonist mother. She noticed that the changes a little later. It was at that time when she told her about this woman. Mrs. Dorling, she was an old contact of her mother, whom she hadn't seen for years. Suddenly, she came to visit her, and since then, they had been in regular contact. Her mother told her that whenever that woman came to visit her, she took something from the house with her: table silvers, antique plates, and she had trouble over carrying the large vase. She told her that the cramp on her back came from the crockery. So she is collecting all these crockeries, and she is just hiding inside her dress. That's why she is have a cramp on her back. Her mother shook her head in sorrow. The woman kept telling the protagonist's mother that she wanted to save her precious things. If they had to leave the place someday, they would lose everything. So this woman just very cunningly collecting all the properties of the author and her mother, and just she just giving her the warning. The war is going on. Sometimes these two people may have to run away from the place. So by the time this woman, Dorling, can keep all the precious things they have safely, and this mother and the author thinking that once when they come back, Dorling will return all the things. These two people are believing. But this Dorling is a very cunning woman. She is gradually just snatching all the properties from these two people. She asked her mother if she really wanted her to take all the things with her. Her mother replied that even if she didn't, It would be an insult to ask her not to. She was going out with a risk herself, a suitcase full of items. Her mother noticed that she wasn't convinced and looked at her critically. After that day, they never talked about the incident again. She reached the station without noticing any details on the way. Now, the author is reached at the station. So far, she is thinking about one of the incidents, her conversation with her mother about this Dorling. Now, she reached the station. She passed the familiar things after the war for the first time. Now only she came back after the war. She would like to collect all the things this Darling took from them in the first half of the war. She didn't want to upset herself with the familiar sights of houses and streets that reminded her of all the precious times. So she is not giving much attention to the familiar things. Familiar things means the same place she has spent in her childhood. So she is not giving much attention to it because it brings lot of memories about her mother, her childhood, everything. So it brings unnecessary worries. So she is not giving much importance to the things or the sightseeings. Again, another memory related to this lady coming in the mind of the author. Back in the time, she saw Mrs. Dorling in person a day after her mother told her daughter, here the author, about Dorling. The author woke up late that morning, and as she was going downstairs, she saw her, the lady with the broad back here. This is Darling. Her mother was seeing her out here, saying goodbye. Her mother introduced the protagonist to the lady. She signaled to her, and the woman responded with a note. She picked the suitcase under the coat rack. She was wearing a brown coat and a shapeless hat. The protagonist asked her mother if she lived far away. By the time her mother told her the address, Marconi Street, number 46, she remembered it. She remembered the address, but she took too long to visit the place. After the freedom, she was on one hand not interested and on the other hand was afraid. She was afraid of getting confronted with the past memories and connections that no longer existed. Here, the author is afraid of the memories of her mother. If she see all those things, her mother kept it very preciously in her home, all the crockeries, all those things, furniture, everything. But she is sure that this darling might not kept it properly. So after watching all those things, the memory of her mother or past memories may come to her mind. That's why she is afraid to confront all those things. It seemed that those memories were waiting in vain to put them back to their places as they had suffered all these years because they were only things were getting normal in the life of protagonist, but one day she got curious about all the things that were still at that address. She wanted to see them and touch them. After the first hopeless visit, she decided to try one more time. When she reached Mrs. Dorling's home, a girl of 15 years opened the door. The protagonist asked her about her mother. She told her that she was outside doing some errands to which the protagonist decided that she would wait for her. I am going to end the summary narration here. The balance part of the story I will narrate in the next class. Now, all of you just read the text so far I have narrated. Don't forget to have a dictionary. Just underline the new words and try to find out the words. See you in the next class. Bye.